do you remember when we did the 1 whole and we figured out that it was 2 halves, 3/3, 5/5, 6/6, and a bunch of other things? Well, first off for this lesson, we're going to have to remember these little details. So, remember that 1 whole can be written as a bunch of different things. When we had our fraction circles, if we have 1 whole, it would be anything over itself. Keep that in mind as we go through today's lesson. Alright, first up, we are going to be subtracting mixed numbers when we're going to have to borrow. This is a whole lesson on itself because it's super tricky. So if you remember what was up there before, that will help you. We're going to do a problem together. Here we go. 2 minus 1 and 1/3. Okay, so usually we talk about subtracting our whole numbers first, then our fraction. The only problem here, though, is that we have a fraction and no fraction over here. So it gets kind of tricky. If you think about your bars, that would be like having 2 solid bars and then subtracting 1 whole. So we would just erase 1 and take that away. And then 1/3. And we would have one of those taken away. So you would really be left with 2/3. Now we can draw pictures, but when you get into bigger numbers, the pictures are a little bit harder. So let's see if we can figure this out with borrowing. If you remember, with what we've learned, the 2 can be written as 1 plus 1. Now if we start to think, this 1 could be replaced with any fraction over itself. So since we have a 1/3 over here, it probably would be nice to subtract like fractions. So we could change this 1 to 1 plus 3/3. This is the exact same thing. We just turned it into something that would be helpful to do this. So then I'm going to put them back together and I'm going to have 1 and 3/3 minus this one up here, 1 and 1/3. This is like a whole problem, which we've done before, okay? So we've subtracted these before and they're not too bad. We subtract our whole numbers. 1 minus 1 would be 0. And then 3/3 minus 1/3, we keep the denominators the same and subtract the numerators. So we're left with 2/3. Same thing as when I drew a picture. We're just borrowing in this case. Ready for another one? Up next we have 4 and 1/4 minus 2 and 5/8. So first things we want to do is get our fractions the same, like fractions, so that we can compare them better. So 4 and 8, what's going to be similar would be our 8. So we're going to do this fraction times 2. Notice I haven't done anything with my whole numbers yet. I'm actually changing my fractions first. This would then change to my 4 stays the same. And I have 2 on top and 8 on the bottom minus 2 and 5/8. Now they're both similar, but look, we have a 2 over here and a 5 over here. You can't subtract 2 minus 5. That's a negative number. So what we're going to have to do is borrow from this 4. Here's how we do that. 4 can be written as 3 plus 1 plus our 2/8. That's still 4. We've just broken it apart. From here, we can change that 1 into a fraction. Since we have 8ths, it'd probably be good to keep it as 8ths. So we can write it as 3 plus 8/8 8ths, because that's 1 whole, plus 2/8. Now we can put it back together so that we get a fraction that we can actually work with. So we would have 8 plus 2, which would be 10 over 8. And I keep my 3 the same. Now I know you're thinking that's an improper fraction, and it is, but we have to have that to subtract. So from here, I'm going to bring this one all the way down. And now I have 2 and 5/8. And I can subtract 10 minus 5. That we know how to do. So now it's just like normal. Subtract your whole numbers. 3 minus 2 is 1. And then 10 minus 5 is 5. My bottom number is 8 because I want to keep it the same. And if we look, do I have to simplify? No. Keep it the same. All right, let's do one more problem. Five and 2/5 minus 3 and 4/5. 5 and 2/5 minus 3 and 4/5. Okay, this one, they have like denominators, but I can't do 2 minus 4, so I'm going to have to borrow. That means my whole number of the first one I have to borrow, so I have to break it apart. I can do 4 plus 1, which is still 5, and then plus my 2/5. That's my fraction. Then we can change this 1 to something that'll add really nice and easy. We always want to keep it the same as the denominator because that makes it easy to add. So I would change this 1 to, now let's see though, if I change it to 2/2, is it easy to add 2 and 5? No, I have to multiply that, and it's just more work for me. Whereas if I make this 5/5, it adds really nicely. So now I've got a whole number of 4. I'm going to combine these. 5 plus 2 is 7, and my denominator stays the same. Yeah, I know it's an improper fraction, but just for a second, we're going to bring this one down and subtract. So we have 3 and 4/5. 4 minus 3 is 1. 7 minus 4 is 3. And our denominator stays the same. Can we simplify? No, we cannot. All right, we'll be looking at more of these in class. These are kind of tricky when you have to borrow. What you need to just remember is that we can write the 1 as anything over itself. As long as you come to class knowing that, we can work with you.